Yeah, I'm no doctor. I'm just saying what I've heard. And that was in no way, it wasn't said in a way that they're like, oh, what do you think? I said, I think he's fine. It wasn't like that.
This was Tom Aspinall's moment. His shot at proving everything. But in one heartbeat, it all crumbled. His sight, his championship hopes, his bond with Dana White. Now the heavyweight picture sits frozen while tension mounts, secret demands emerge, and time runs out. The champion strikes back.
I'm generally doing pretty good, thanks, mate. Yeah, everything in my life is pretty amazing. Can't complain.
How are the eyes?
The eyes are, unfortunately, not back to full health yet. So we're still waiting.
After UFC 312 Tom Aspinall went dark. While he dealt with the medical maze of his injury, the public kept tearing him apart. His dad, Andy, gave the first real updates, revealing Tom still couldn't see right from his injured eye, and only had half vision in the other. The muscles moving his eyes weren't working, and the champion faced something way more serious than anyone knew. But the online hate kept coming, people saying he was hiding from what really went down in Abu Dhabi.
He's doing a media tour on it. He's milking it, and I'm like, bro, if you don't believe the eye poke and you don't believe the doctor's reports, like, what are we doing? Like, what's going on here? Like, I didn't make this shit up. Go watch the replay, check out the doctor's reports.
For Aspinall, staying quiet wasn't about running away. It was survival. Multiple specialist visits every week. Tests that would decide if his vision would ever come back. The guy who built his career on lightning reflexes was now fighting just to see straight. Double vision turned simple things into nightmares, and getting back to a sport where milliseconds mean everything felt like a fantasy.
Okay, and last one from me. Tom Aspinall did interviews recently saying that his eye is not better. He was a little bit disappointed with some comments you made. Have you spoke to Tom? Do you know anything about that? And what's your reaction to what he said?
I have not. Yeah, I mean, I get it. I don't remember exactly what I said. What did I say? That is...
Just said you think that
I think his eyes are okay.
November 30th, 2025. Aspinall dropped comprehensive medical proof from UK NHS specialists that shut down any reasonable doubt about how bad this was. The diagnosis hit hard. Significant bilateral Brown syndrome, a rare condition hitting the superior oblique tendon complex that locks up upward eye movement, especially when looking inward. The medical files confirmed ongoing double vision, restricted eye movement, reduced visual function and sharpness, major visual field loss from Humphrey field testing, orbital soft tissue damage, and possibly a minimally displaced fracture of the right medial orbital wall.
I said, I think Tom's eyes are good. He's going to take some time, heal, come back to, that's all I said. I wasn't saying anything negative toward him. And I think that things can be taken out of context, or he didn't see what I said, because I don't even remember what the I said. But never once did I say anything negative about him or, in a derogatory way.
The condition Aspinall got stuck with usually hits just one eye and you're born with it. Bilateral traumatic Brown syndrome from a sudden injury is incredibly rare, making the damage Gain caused during their title fight genuinely exceptional medically. The champion couldn't train, couldn't fight, and was looking at possible surgery on both eyes, with recovery stretching into 20. For someone whose career exploded with quick finishes, months sitting out with vision problems was a nightmare nobody could have imagined.
As soon as you get all the way up, people get uncomfortable and they want to bring you down. And unfortunately, I have experienced my fair share of that, which is crazy. Like you say, I think this might be the only sport that, like, you can be not the fouler, but the foulee. Is that a term? A foulee?
Yeah.
The medical proof Aspinall released did more than just show how hurt he was. It forced everyone who called him a quitter to face hard evidence that destroyed their story. The champion hadn't chosen to stop because the fight got tough or because Gain was winning. He'd been physically broken by an accidental foul that caused damage nobody understood at first. The difference between choosing not to fight and being unable to fight was now backed up by real medical evidence from actual specialists. With the medical proof out there, Aspinall went after the man whose words had fueled most of the hate he faced. Early December 2025, the champion sat with Ariel Helwani and made his disappointment with Dana White crystal clear. He explained White hadn't reached out personally since the fight, but was giving public health updates without real information. The champion noted he deals mostly with UFC executive Hunter Campbell, not White directly, but the silence from the promotion's president after such a serious injury felt like betrayal. The champion's words on the Helwani show were careful, but sharp. He said he was very disappointed with White's early comments, and they definitely didn't help when he was already getting unfair criticism from fans. White, giving health updates publicly without talking to Aspen directly or having accurate medical info, struck the champion as especially wrong given his loyalty to the promotion. December 7th, 2025. Dana White tackled the controversy head-on during the post-fight press conference for UFC 323 in Las Vegas. The UFC president insisted he never said anything negative about Aspen, claiming his words got twisted. White explained he was just sharing early medical reports when he suggested there was no eye damage, and UFC staff had been checking on Aspen's recovery, even if White himself hadn't personally called. The promotion's president stressed that only Aspen truly knew what he experienced when he decided he couldn't continue. He said he understood why Aspen might be upset, but maintained no intentional criticism was ever aimed at the champion. But the damage was done. The story that Aspen had somehow quit or chosen not to continue had spread through parts of the MMA community, and the champion's relationship with the promotion's leadership was publicly strained in a way rarely seen with active title holders. The back and forth between Aspen and White was unusual, a UFC champion publicly expressing disappointment with the organization's leadership. Most fighters, knowing the power balance in their relationship with the promotion, keep complaints private or save them until after their careers end. Aspen's willingness to speak openly about his frustration showed how deep his feelings ran about how things were handled, and his confidence that his track record of loyalty and performance meant he deserved better treatment after UFC. October 25th, 2025, inside the Etihad Arena in Abu Dhabi, the UFC heavyweight division witnessed a complete nightmare. Tom Aspen, the undisputed heavyweight champion, who'd waited longer than any interim title holder in UFC history for his shot at legitimacy, was finally defending against former interim champion Cyril Gane. The fight had been building since July 2024, when Aspen last competed, and anticipation among fight fans had reached a breaking point. This was supposed to be when Aspen silenced doubters and locked down his place on top of the heavyweight division. What happened over the next 4 minutes and 35 seconds would create one of the most controversial chapters in recent UFC heavyweight history. Put the champion against the promotion's president and freeze the entire division in uncertainty. The fight started exactly like experts predicted. Gane used his speed advantage perfectly, landing clean jabs that bloodied Aspen's nose early and controlling distance with leg kicks and brilliant footwork. The Frenchman, who many had written off after John Jones dominated him in a previous title fight, was showing the world he still belonged among heavyweight elite. His movement was sharp, his timing perfect, and his ability to maintain distance against a pressure fighter like Aspen showed why he'd once been considered the future of the heavyweight division before his crushing loss to Jones. Aspen never backed down, firing back with heavy leg kicks of his own, one nearly dropping Gane, along with punishing body shots and clean punches that reminded everyone why he holds the UFC record for shortest average fight time at just 2 minutes, 18 seconds. The champion was hunting for the finish that had become his signature, stalking Gane around the octagon, looking for the opening that would let him unleash the explosive combinations that had ended so many fights before. His power showed in every exchange, and Gane's respect for that power was clear in how carefully he engaged. The competitive first round had fans on edge. This was exactly the championship-level contest everyone paid to see. Aspen, known for explosive first-round finishes that made him the most dangerous closer in heavyweight history, was being tested in ways his previous opponents couldn't manage. Gane's movement and striking accuracy presented puzzles that needed solutions, and for the first time in years, fans saw Aspen forced to work through problems rather than just overwhelming his opponent with speed and power. Then, with about 25 seconds left in the first round, disaster struck. As Aspen threw a kick, Gane moved forward with a punch combination, his fingers extending open and poking Aspen in both eyes at once. This wasn't a standard eye poke that happens regularly in mixed martial arts and usually causes a brief pause. This was a double eye gouge that immediately left the heavyweight champion unable to see. Referee Jason Herzog followed protocol exactly, stopping the action and giving Aspen the standard 5-minute recovery time, introduced as a rule change in 2022, specifically for eye poke incidents. The champion kept telling the cage-side doctor he couldn't see, holding cloth to his eyes while medical staff checked the damage. The doctor noted no immediate globe damage, but confirmed severe visual impairment that made continuing impossible. After nearly using up the recovery time, Aspen confirmed to Herzog that continuing was impossible. The blurred and double vision he was experiencing made fighting one of the most dangerous strikers in the heavyweight division medically impossible. The fight was ruled a no contest due to accidental foul, with Herzog deciding the eye poke was unintentional, meaning no disqualification victory for Aspen. The champion kept his title, but the victory felt empty, and the crowd's reaction made it worse. Some fans booed Aspen, frustrated with the anticlimactic ending to a fight they'd traveled across the world and paid premium prices to see. The champion showed his anger in the cage right after the stoppage, reportedly saying he'd just been poked deep in his eyeball and couldn't see. He was taken to a hospital in Abu Dhabi immediately after the event, but what he found there was another source of frustration. The emergency facilities were overwhelmed, and the champion waited in line for hours only to be seen by medical staff who didn't know much about eye injuries. Real treatment wouldn't start until he got back to the United Kingdom, leaving Aspen to deal with uncertainty about his condition during the long trip home. While Aspen dealt with a medical emergency that could permanently affect his vision, the story about his inability to continue was already being shaped by forces beyond his control. The booing from fans had signaled a troubling sentiment that would only get louder, and the champion had no chance to defend himself while focused on his physical condition. While Aspen handled the medical aftermath, Dana White went to the post-fight press conference and said the words that would start a firestorm. The UFC president, clearly frustrated by the evening's outcome, called the ending a pain in the rear and characterized it as a disappointing conclusion. But his next statement truly grabbed attention and would haunt the relationship between promoter and champion for months. White said Aspen didn't want to continue in the fight, a phrase that implied choice rather than physical inability. He also initially reported there was no damage to the champion's eyes, pushing for a quick rematch based on early medical reports that would prove dramatically wrong. White's comments had immediate and devastating effects. Fans who'd already criticized the stoppage now had ammunition from the UFC president himself, accusing Aspen of lacking heart or quitting when things got tough. Social media exploded with criticism aimed at the champion, a man who devoted his entire life to combat sports and proven repeatedly that he had knockout power and finishing ability few heavyweights in history could match. What made the situation especially painful for Aspen was the context of his journey to this moment. He'd been the longest-serving interim champion in UFC history, waiting patiently while Jon Jones dealt with injuries and ultimately chose retirement rather than facing him. He'd taken short-notice fights to prove himself, defended his interim belt when the promotion asked, and stayed loyal to the UFC throughout a process that would have frustrated most fighters into demanding releases or causing public relations nightmares. Now, after an injury caused by his opponent's foul, he was being portrayed as someone who simply didn't want to compete. As December 2025 ends, the UFC heavyweight division remains frozen. Tom Aspen continues medical recovery, with surgery scheduled for the coming weeks to address the persistent double vision and restricted eye movement that have plagued him since that night in Abu Dhabi. The champion hasn't been cleared to train, can't engage in any combat activity, and faces a recovery timeline medical professionals can't accurately predict. The rematch with Cyril Gane, that Dana White immediately confirmed as the next title fight, remains officially unscheduled, with no date announced and no indication when one might come. The situation has created an unusual dynamic where the heavyweight champion and promotion's president have publicly disagreed while still supposedly working toward the same goal of booking a rematch. Former UFC champion Henry Cejudo, who has his own frustrations with Dana White and the promotion, offered advice to Aspen during fight week for UFC. Cejudo emphasized that White is a promoter while Aspen is a fighter, and taking the president's comments personally could create unnecessary problems. The veteran suggested Aspen should avoid fighting with the boss, acknowledging that White's willingness to speak his mind is part of what makes him effective at promoting fights. Bushido's advice carried weight, given his own history with the UFC, having retired from the promotion in 2020 amid frustrations over pay and treatment before eventually returning to competition. The former flyweight and bantamweight champion understood the delicate balance fighters must maintain between advocating for themselves and keeping productive relationships with the organization that controls their ability to compete at the highest level. The bad blood between Aspen and Gane has only gotten worse during this waiting period. The champion has publicly accused Gane of intentional cheating, pointing to slow-motion replays that he believes show the Frenchman's fingers deliberately pushing deeper into his eyes. Aspen has criticized Gane's disgusting fingernails and promised to deal with him physically when they meet again. For his part, Gane has posted on social media about having no date or opponent confirmed, training while waiting for clarity on his future. Early hopes for quick rebooking have been completely crushed by how severe Aspen's injury is. The suggestion that the rematch could happen at UFC 323 in December 2025 or early 2026 now seems wildly optimistic, given medical realities. The most realistic window for Aspen versus Gane 2 appears to be mid to late 2026, potentially summer or later, depending on surgical outcomes and the champion's recovery from procedures that carry their own risks. The UFC hasn't announced plans for an interim title, meaning the division will stay on hold until Aspen gets full medical clearance. This extended timeline creates problems beyond just the champion and his challenger. Other heavyweight contenders working their way up the rankings find themselves stuck, unsure whether to keep competing or wait for opportunities that may not come for many months. The story of Tom Aspen represents everything that can go wrong when communication breaks down between a champion and promotion at the worst possible moment. Here was a fighter who'd done everything asked of him, who'd waited patiently through the John Jones saga, who'd accepted interim title defenses when unification fights weren't available, who'd represented the UFC with professionalism throughout his career. His reward for that loyalty was having his integrity publicly questioned right after a legitimate medical emergency, forcing him to release private medical records to defend against accusations he'd somehow manufactured or exaggerated his injury. The championship picture at heavyweight now depends entirely on factors beyond anyone's control. Will surgery on Aspen's eyes be successful? Will his recovery let him return to full combat readiness? Will the relationship between champion and promotion's leadership recover from this public disagreement? These questions have no immediate answers, and the UFC heavyweight division, historically the most prestigious weight class in the sport, remains without an active champion or clear path forward. For Tom Aspen, the coming months will be defined by medical appointments, surgical procedures, and the slow work of rehabilitation. The fighter who built his career on explosive knockouts must now exercise patience he's never needed before, trusting doctors and specialists while watching the sport continue without him. For Dana White and the UFC, the situation presents a promotional challenge with no easy solutions. The heavyweight title can't be on the line if the champion can't compete. Yet the division's other contenders continue training and aging while they wait. The entire situation represents a cautionary tale about the fragility of even the most dominant champions. Aspen holds the UFC record for shortest average fight time, has earned 7 performance bonuses, tying him for 4th most in promotion history, and was widely considered the most dangerous finisher in the heavyweight division before his injury. He's a BJJ black belt, with exceptional striking speed for his 6'5" frame, a man who knocked out Curtis Blades in just 60 seconds to avenge his only UFC loss. Yet one accidental foul, one unintended extension of fingers during a punch combination, has potentially derailed an entire year of his prime. The tension between Aspen and White appears to have cooled somewhat by late December, with focus shifting to the champion's health and eventual return rather than their public disagreement. But the underlying issues that created the conflict remain unresolved. The champion believes the president's words damaged his reputation unfairly. The president maintains he meant no harm, and was simply reporting what he'd been told at the time. What remains certain is that when Tom Aspen finally returns to the octagon, whenever that may be, the eyes of the combat sports world will be watching. Not just his eyes, which will have undergone surgical intervention and months of recovery, but the metaphorical eyes of millions of fans who want to see if the champion can reclaim the momentum so cruelly interrupted in Abu Dhabi. The rematch with Cyril Gane will carry even more significance now, not just for the heavyweight championship, but for Aspin's legacy and his relationship with the organization he's served so loyally. The heavyweight division has historically been the crown jewel of the UFC, the weight class where the biggest and most powerful athletes on the planet compete for supremacy. Just like Brock Lesnar, Cain Velasquez, Stipe Miocic, and Francis Ngannou have defined eras of the sport, Tom Aspin was positioned to do the same before injury intervened. His combination of speed, power, and technical skill at 65 pounds represented something genuinely special, a heavyweight who moved like a middleweight and hit like a freight train. The sport can't afford to lose such talent to an injury sustained through an opponent's accidental foul, yet that possibility now looms larger than anyone would prefer to acknowledge. The heavyweight division waits, the champion heals, and Dana White's words about not being able to wait forever echo in the background, a reminder that in professional fighting, time is the one opponent no champion can defeat indefinitely.